Okay, so I listened to the Coliseum discussions, and I want to give a shout out to BGS, of course, and people who come to his channel on Saturday nights for the Coliseum. I learned a lot there, and I did listen to the Bitter Truth show as well when he came on a couple hangouts ago, or maybe last hangout. And he discussed this topic, this actual article. You can find this article on Springer Link. I'll leave a link to it in the description box. It's also linked in the comments below the hangout that BGS had as well. I have the link there. But I wrote down the title of the article and found it myself. It was published September 2013. The title is The Influence of Ambient Ultraviolet Light on Sperm Quality and Sexual Ornamentation in 3 spine sticklebacks, also known as Gasterosteus aculeatus. So it is a pretty lengthy article, but I will read the abstract and then I'm going to show a few of their figures because I think it's important to reiterate why you see a lot of changes occurring in society. And Bitter Truth talks specifically towards changes that we see concerning abortion, the reversal of a lot of women's rights in terms of abortion, reproductive rights, because people who are of European descent and those who lack melanin are finding it harder and harder to reproduce on this planet. Their birth rate is below replacement worldwide. And 2 of the main places where the birth rates are normal or above average are the continent of Africa and also in India. So, of course, these are places where people are highly melanated. So let's get into the abstract. They say here, exposure to enhanced levels of ambient ultraviolet UV radiation, or UVR, can have adverse effects on aquatic organisms, including damage at the cellular and molecular level, and impairment of development, fecundity, and survival. Much research has been conducted on the role of the harmful UVB radiation. However, due to its greater penetration in water, the more abundant UVA radiation can also act as an environmental stressor. Little is known about UVR effects on sperm characteristics, although sperm cells should be especially prone to UV-induced oxidative stress. Moreover, UV-related changes in oxidative status may affect the phenotypic expression of energetically costly sexual ornaments. We investigated the effects of long-term exposure to ecologically relevant levels of simulated UVA radiation on sperm quality and sexual ornamentation in 3 spine sticklebacks, and that's the genus species name again. Males were assigned to 3 spectral exposure treatments differing in the UV spectral part, so that they received either enhanced, moderate, or no UVA radiation. The results reveal that exposure to enhanced ambient UVA levels had detrimental effects on both male breeding coloration and sperm velocity, providing evidence that UVR affects traits targeted by pre- and post-copulatory sexual selection. By highlighting the role of UVA as a factor influencing fitness-relevant traits, our findings may contribute to a better understanding of the consequences of current and future levels of solar UVR for mating systems and life history. I know it seems like a lot. I know. It's really not. And what I'm going to do is go through the abstract, because on ResearchGate and probably on Springer Link, unless you have a subscription, You will not be able to see a lot of things such as their introduction. Like they show some of it here, but it's so small, and I'm gonna try my best not to get into that because as a scientist, I love to read and I will get stuck and lost in the sauce, and I don't want that to happen to you all while I'm trying to convey this message in a clear and concise manner. Anyway, Bay was right when he talked about how UVR, which is ultraviolet radiation, can have adverse effects on your DNA. Yes, that is true. In fact, when the effects of UVR regulate DNA synthesis, regulate DNA quality, it will affect your sperm count. It will affect the velocity, as they say here, of the sperm. So that's how fast the sperm are able to swim. With this type of fish species, sexual ornaments are considered what human men would consider, the penis and the testes. So those are considered sexual ornaments, right? Because those are the tools of copulation, the tools of reproduction, because they are external, they're outside of your body. So they didn't talk about size of these sexual ornaments. They did talk about color, and they did talk about speed of the sperm that is released from the sexual ornament, these sexual organs. So another thing they went into is little is known about UVR effects on sperm characteristics. Although sperm cells should be especially prone to UV-induced oxidative stress. Now that is true because in the water, a fish has these sexual ornaments, aka their sexual organs, outside of their body prior to, during, and slightly after copulation. And they should be prone to UV-induced oxidative stress as well because UV radiation does affect oxygen quality in the water. It therefore affects O2 levels within the blood. O2 can become electronegative, more electronegative. So you can go from O2 to O2 negative. And excuse me, you can also have superoxide bodies that are produced in the blood. So the tissues in the blood can become more oxidative and more inflammatory. You're more likely to have inflammation within the tissues. So nitric oxide synthase, or NOS, is an enzyme that would be inducing more oxidative stress. You also have superoxide dismutase, SOD, which is a enzyme that would reverse the activity of oxidative stress or reverse inflammation. And usually during these times, the SOD inhibitor of the oxidative stress would be turned down and NOS would be turned up. You have neuronal NOS, which is within the nerve cells. You have inducible NOS, which is usually induced by something like an outside stressor, like radiation. And you also have eNOS. eNOS is endothelial nitric oxide synthase, which is found within the endothelial or blood vessel cells. So oxidative stress is very important when you're looking at these types of studies for just to understand how radiation is really affecting us. Another key point I will say before I go to the figures is that Bay pointed out that the UN said within a year, the world's speed, the Earth's speed, has picked up, has tripled, gone from 25 miles in a year, meaning that the Earth turns 25 miles in a year, to turning 75 miles in a year. That affects our ability to be protected from the sun's harmful rays and solar winds. It also affects metabolism. It affects what I just talked about earlier. That's why I spent a minute or so discussing oxidative stress, because higher exposure to sun will induce oxidative stress. It does not matter if you are the highest melanated person on the planet. You will have some form of oxidative stress if that happens, and it is happening more and more, and they're recognizing this now. So when Bay was talking about, or excuse me, Bitter Truth Show was talking about how they're talking about this is their genocide. That's true. That is very true. He's not trying to scare anyone. I hope that people were paying attention to what he was saying. I think his signal was lost or something happened where he wasn't able to finish his presentation, but I really appreciated him coming on there. And I hope that he has opportunity to come back or do a follow-up. That would be great. So let's get into the data. Shout out to Theo C.M. Bacher. He's one of the, I guess, authors, and he uploaded these figures. So the first figure here, figure 1, talks about the spectral irradiance of downwelling light measured in a holding tank under 3 exposure treatments of UV. So the control is UV, the black dashed line, as you can see. With UV, you have the gray solid line. And UV that is, and when they say with UV, the UV plus with 1 plus, that's a low level UV. And UV with 2 pluses, which is the black solid line, that is higher, higher UV exposure. And the mean solar irradiance collected between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. on a sunny, I guess that means a sunny day, on a sunny day during the early breeding season on the island of Texel. That's the gray dashed line. So at the gray dashed line, you have the mean solar irradiance, which is very high, between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. That's your peak time for sun to be, for UVA, UVB rays to be hitting the water and refracting in all different directions. And you have the UV plus plus, the black dotted line, which is matching, the UV plus plus, which is high UV black solid line. And that line is supposed to match the UV plus gray solid line. But what happens at the lower wavelengths from around 325 to 400 is you see this sharp peak starting around 370, 360 or so, and falling off around 400. You start to see this sharp peak in spectral irradiation that's occurring. And that's around the same wavelength that Bitter Truth Show talked about. That's very dangerous. Okay. So the shorter the wavelength, I'll repeat what he said. The shorter the wavelength, the more energetic the energy is. The higher or longer the wavelength, the less energy there is. Okay. The less energetic that those photons and the less energetic the UVA rays will be. The next figure is the most important figure, I think, of their paper. They have other figures, but I chose to focus on this one because it's talking about how UV doses affect chromaticity of the red cheek region and sperm velocity of these fish. So in the top A, it's the chromaticity of the red cheek region. What that means is open circles are male chromaticity at the breeding peak, and the crosses show chromaticity at the end of the experiment. So what happens if you follow the open circles and the crosses, the X's that are at the top, the ones with the crosses show higher chromaticity at the beginning of the experiment, and over time chromaticity drops with or without UV radiation. Okay, but they drop faster with UV radiation. In B, you see open circles which represent early measurements of sperm velocity, and the crosses show the late measurement, and you see it drop across. So at the bottom on the x-axis, you see UV dose set at 1.578 kilojoules per meter squared. That is your control. The second dose is 25.8 kilojoules per meter. And the third dose is 55.62 kilojoules per meter. These are your UVA doses, right? Because people always say UVB is more dangerous. In this case, they're talking about animals that live in water. UVA and UVB are dangerous, but they look at UVA here. And as you can see, as time goes on with more more potent doses, you have reduced sperm velocity, indicating that light from the sun is becoming very damaging, and it is reducing the sperm's ability to do what they were meant to do, which is to swim fast as possible to make it to the egg. So I hope that this was interesting to you. There are other figures within this paper. Shout out again to BGS, Bitter Truth Show, everyone that shows up. I have a great time learning over there. Of course, we have laughs and everything. Shout out to Charles Faulkner. Y'all go hit up his channel. You know, he's pimping his channel now, you know, doing his thing. But yeah, shout out to everybody. Thank you for coming to my channel. Thank you for checking this video out. I hope to talk to you soon. You have a great day. Be safe and keep reading.